Let's assemble Gnock, and to start with, we need to figure out where the beard goes, and to figure that out, we need to put the hat on. So let's clear this place and get going. So we're going to need the hat, the beard, a double-pointed needle, and our body. So the body has, it doesn't really matter what side is your front or your back because we're going to be covering it up, and the only difference is the bind off section here of the 3-needle bind off. So don't worry about that. Just pick the side that you think looks better in your Gnock. I'm going to go with this one. Let's put the hat on. We're going to tug it down firmly. This is a little bit of a nuance thing. You want it to be deep enough down that the head fills up here, but we don't want it to be so deep that it's stretched. And right now this here is stretched. So I'm going to pull mine up a little bit. And it may be that up here is good, but this here is actually stretched. So let's see if I just loosen this here. Yeah, see, you can see everything's sort of going into shape, and it's because this part here was good, but I had pulled too far below that. So let's see if we can get everything back in. Yeah, that's looking a lot better in terms of how this lays. Now we have to remember that there will be a bit of fabric under here for the beard, and then the nose actually isn't going to go under for Gnock. So if we can just imagine the beard going in here, but that's still not going to distort things too much. So that feels pretty good. And for me, the distance between the fold and the lowest part, let's have a look, is about 5.5 inches or 15 centimeters roughly. So that's what I'm going with. What we need to do now is we need to put the beard on and pin it so we know where to put it. So this beard gets lined up under the ribbing. So we're going to put it over the ribbing to start. Make sure it's high enough there, and then I'm going to pin it on using my DPN. If you don't have a DPN, you can use a cable needle, you can use a long needle from a circular needle or something like that. If you have anything that helps you pin, let's go down. The trick is to not go too far down so that the corner shows out. It's not a perfect 50, it's not a 100% match in terms of the shape of the hat and the shape of the upper beard. And we really want to make sure that our beard is covered at these corner points. So let's just go there. All right, so now we're going to pull the hat off, and now we'll stitch down the beard. If you've done a beard with me before, you will know that I will say that if it's if you've done a gnome with me before, you will know that I will say that if it's a toy, you have to stitch everything down doubly certain. Anything that can be used to hold a gnome and carry it around will be used. So you need to be very careful that any stitching you do is maybe doubled, or you do it much, much closer than I'm showing here. My gnome will be a decoration, and so I don't need to go with the thing in mind that a toddler is going to grab this and carry the gnome around by it. So we don't have to worry about hiding things very much because this is going to be covered. So just make sure that you've got that the end sort of high enough up, these corners, and then you can just go up and down along this top edge. So one thing to check is that when you look here, that this seems to be about the same height, that you haven't sort of somehow twisted the beard. So just make sure that it's as high as the other side. I'm looking pretty good here. So let's come out just below that corner. One of the best things you can do for safety with these features is to make sure corners are done extra triple thick or triple well when you're doing these for toys. So when you get to the corners, make sure you go extra assiduously in tacking it down from the beard to the body. For this one, aim your stitches up rather than to the side or down, just so that we can avoid peeping out beneath the brim. All right, So now I'm going to go underneath. Actually, before I do anything and cut this and make sure that it's like we're sort of committed, I'm actually going to put my hat back on. So now that I've confirmed that placement works, now I can knot and cut. And then woodworking, they always say measure twice, cut once. And I think with personality-based sewing things together, it's just confirm once and then cut. Don't get too gung-ho if there's something else that your position is dependent on. Positioning is personality when it comes to toys. I did that so fast, I'm sorry. All right, to make a knot, go under a loop of the beard. And I'll have to do it again because I was talking that whole time. All right, so I've made a loop now by going through here. All right, we can see my loop. So I'm going to go through that loop twice. Once. Twice. And I'm going to pull on this side while nudging it closer with my thumbnail and my fingertip. Once I'm real nice and close, I can then just sort of go down. I'm going to go down through the beard and right through the body. I'm going to come out over here. Once I've done that, if I pull it taut here and snip close to the fabric without cutting the fabric, that end will disappear inside the stuffing and live there forever. Gnock's nose is also beard dependent, or hat dependent, I should say. So let's get that back on. And usually I like my brims to droop over the nose, but I think Gnock looks better with the nose sort of right at this junction here. So the highest it can go without actually being on the beard or on the brim. You can, in fact, actually sew the nose onto the brim and body and beard and body. I do recommend that you actually go down and sew the hat. But if you think you're going to be removing the hat for some reason, then don't do that. But if you wanted to just sew right through these layers right now, you could. All right, so I'm just going to stab this big needle through here so that I know that that's where I want the nose. Making sure we're centered, things are looking good. Here we go. I've got one long and one short, and it makes a lot more sense to use the long end to do the first set of securing, and then we'll just take the short end through to the other side and tie a knot. I like to do it so that my stitches are oriented vertically, the same as the stitches on the body. Once I have my placement, what I will do is roll the nose down a little bit, and I will first go through the beard and the body, making sure I've got both layers of fabric under there. And then I will go around through the nose and sort of complete a circle. So I've gone this way and now this way. I can do that again. And this way. And now we can roll it up a little bit. Not the full amount, because we're going to do it a second time. So now I'm going to go through the beard and body just a little bit higher. Just a little bit higher. This might be a little more visible, so I'm going to make my circle a little smaller. And through there on the nose. And then we're going to come down. I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom third. So go through the nose and then down and make sure we're going through the body. Through the nose. Through the body. And now have a feel. Does that feel nice and stable? If it's going to be a toy, you might want to do another full set of securing with another end. But what I'm going to, and then join us in the next step, which is to bring both ends of the yarn to the other side of the beard. So there's our longer end. Here's our shorter end. going to tie these in a knot. Then you've got two choices. You can either thread them back up through the nose and trim them, or you can go down through the body. Both of them work, it's your choice. I'm going to go up through the nose. So there's my ends. I'm going to go up through the beard, through the nose. Make sure I pull and get those ends coming out. And again, if I pull taut and snip close to this edge of the fabric, they will pop back down and live inside the stuffing. And now we have our nose. Now I played around a lot with how to position the legs, and I found that having them be parallel to the midline here, rather than like angled like on a clock, so both legs flat rather than angling them, gave us the best versatility in terms of the ability to pose the legs. So you might want to play around, use maybe locking stitch markers or DPNs or your needles, and somehow get the legs in position, and then sit knock on whatever you're going to sit knock on, and you will be able to sort of play around and see what you're going to do, what you like. Now, as I said in the video where we stuffed these and did the socks, if this will be a toy, you're going to want to secure the stuffing so that it doesn't wiggle its way up the leg. So I suggest you take a strand of your leg color and just stitch closed. Just stitch it right along here so that that stuffing is there. It'll be flat here, but you won't notice at all that that's happening, because there is a transition from the roundness of the sock to the flatness of the leg anyways. The flatness of the leg and not stuffing it is what lets us sort of play around with the leg a bit more. If you wanted to have sort of a knee joint, you could play around with stuffing very lightly in the lower leg, sewing and then stuffing again. But the more you stuff here, the harder it's going to be for Gnock to sit flat. So really play around with and prototype your ideas. Just give it a whirl. Don't sew it on before you've tried it. Hard to do this with the camera right above me. If you imagine that there is a midline, I'm going to do about 4 stitches ahead of that midline, and I'm going to put the legs, making sure that I remember that the legs have to make sense. So which way the sock goes is really important. So make sure you remember that there's a front and a back to the foot. And then you want to go just ahead of the midline. That helps Gnock sit a little bit. There's a little bit more of a bum for her to sit on. Okay, so now that I've checked that I like the placement, I'm using DPN and one of my sewing needles. We've kind of played around with the placement a little bit. I'm going to pull the DPN out and now whip stitch it. It's going to look 1,000 times more awkward doing it here on top of the surface rather than in my lap, so just forgive how awkward this is going to look. And what I'm going to do to whip stitch is I'm going to go through both layers of the leg fabric, that little hole that we had, and through the fabric of the body, through both layers of the leg, both layers of the body. If this is going to be a toy, please make sure that this corner here is also done sort of on an angle. So something like this, just to stabilize it. You can also go along and sew Gnock's leg on in a couple places. Just come up and down, almost like we did the beard. And you can create additional sort of buffers that way. But whip stitch is nice and simple. We're just gonna go through all 3 layers of fabric, and then we whip our needle around. And I'm not going to knot this right away. I'm going to leave it so that I can do another check to see if I like my placement. I can already tell that this one isn't parallel, so let's make sure we get that right. So there we go. So what I'm going to do now is I've got a stretch of color that matches kind of closely where I'm going to be stitching. I'm going to be stitching into the top of the ribbing here. We're only going to be doing it a couple points if it's a decoration. If it's a toy, obviously we're doing more. If you're struggling with color matching, you can always flip the brim up and whip stitch using the inside of the hat. So you could go like into the body, into the first round of the reverse stockinette on this side. You could kind of go grab and do that over and over inside. If you don't have the right color or a color close enough, try it out. You may be surprised at what will fade into the ribbing, especially if you choose a shade slightly darker. Slightly brighter will highlight, whereas slightly darker will recede. So I'm just going to start slightly behind where my corner is. And I'm just going to loop my yarn through here, leaving enough that I can tie it later. Now don't leave too long a space between sort of like your fold over and then how long it is when it's just a single length, because you're going to be pulling this through a lot of it's a lot of yarn. I've gone extra in terms of my length here. All right, so I'm going to go through the body and just get it a little bit anchored there, and obviously pull that back out again. Let's not get everything messy. There we are. Okay. So now what we can do is come up where there's a purl and just use this part of the purl to hide your stitch. So come up on one side of it, go down on the other. And it should just kind of recede in there. All right, so then I've come up on this side of that. I'm gonna go on this side. Obviously at the corners, you wanna be a little more frequent in terms of how close together your stitches are. But I found that on my first prototype, about five of these points between the top and the bottom was enough to keep things nice and stable. Again, this is just preference, unless it's a toy, in which case you'll want to be a little closer. Those of you who've been around for a while, and in particular who've done gnome-made gifts, will know I don't like the idea of knowing what's under my gnomes' hats. I think the tops of their heads should be private somehow. So I even invented an under hat for Nova that December. Gnock's body shape and the way the hat worked meant that the best way to get a really great looking hat that would be full of personality and really have fun with the self-striping yarn meant that I had to do this. But that's part of why I'm now sewing this down, is so that Gnock's top of head remains Gnock's top of head. So you may notice that occasionally I'm pulling on this, and that's just to make sure that I'm not tightening if I tighten this line of stitches, this is going to buckle in and it's not going to look good. So I want to make sure that I'm kind of pulling it frequently so that it's the same tension as the fabric underneath. All right, and now we'll go down and then up and under over here. There we go, over on the other side of that nice little sharp peak. And we'll just go all the way around the hat and then tie it off over here. I hope this video helped you and that your Gnock is charming your pants off, knocking your socks off, and generally making you as happy as can be.